So I don't have like a crazy long spiel to talk to you guys about tonight. This is very much about sort of just general FAQ, um, helping you guys understand what solo is and what to do and not do if you're just starting, that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, if anyone has any burning questions right off the bat, we can start with that, or we can start with fitting. Ready, go. Hey, Tranquil. How's it going?
I
Okay.
feel like I'd be better off asking questions afterwards.
Okay. I mean, you can at any point say like, hey, what about this? But we'll start with fitting. Some of my favorite solo fits. And we'll start with frigates, because why not? So I'm just going to link these in Flying Dangerous and also pull them up and simulate them on stream so people can see what we're talking about. What to start with? Start in low sec. So this is a Tristan that I would take into low sec. I'll simulate it here. It's super basic, super cheap, no high slots. All of your damage comes from drones, and you essentially want to not get scrammed. And that's the whole process of this is just don't get scrammed. Hey Arturus, how's it going? If you open that up and simulate it, if you can fit it, and you don't have any issues with those modules, and the CPU and power grid are good to go, that's something you could go try out right now. The speed, as you can see, is really high, 3K. It's not, it's not the fastest thing in the world, but it's fast enough. Most things you'll encounter in low sec will be afterburner fit. So if you find an afterburner fit thing and you can avoid getting scrammed by it, you could just kite it to death, orbit it, 18K, and let your drones do the work. Hey, Thomas. Questions on that, Tristan?
Why is your speed is actually higher than what mine is?
Yep.
Just because of skills and stuff?
Yep, that'll be skills. Let's see what skills would affect that.
Probably acceleration, I think. Acceleration control.
Yep, acceleration control for sure. And navigation, it looks like, would be the two. So I have both those to 5. If you have either of those below 5, then your ship will not go 3,075.3 meters per second, but that's okay. You don't need perfect skills to make these things work. And that's part of the point of flying cheap things, which is something I very highly recommend for those who are just starting out in PvP in general, but especially solo PvP. Loss is a constant reality, especially in solo PvP. So flying ships that are within your means is definitely recommended. If you're flying it around and thinking, oh man, I really don't want to lose this, you're probably flying the wrong ship.
It's less fun also when you feel bad about losing a really expensive ship. Kind of cuts into the fun factor.
Yep, very true. Go ahead, Kai.
Why did you pick the Warriors for your drone?
You could pick other drones if you want. They're the fastest. And actually, just in general, we can talk about drones real quick. Minmatar have the fastest drones. Galente have the slowest. and the trade-off there is in damage. Minotaur deal the least damage, and Galente deal the most. That's just raw damage numbers, though. That does not take into account resists. Minotaur drones deal purely explosive damage. If your target has high explosive resist, then they're dealing even less damage than it says on paper. Same thing with the Galente, they deal thermal damage, and on paper it's the most, but if your opponent has high thermal resistances, you could probably do better with different drones. Caldari deal kinetic. I think they're the tankiest, but I could be wrong.
The second highest DPS.
Yep. And Amar deal EM damage, which generally makes them more desirable than Caldari drones, because EM damage is, again, generally a better damage type to deal in PvP. Actually, that can lead us into a discussion of damage types. What kind of damage do you want to deal in most cases? Again, this is very simplified. This is not a hard and fast rule in any way, but against shield ships, EM or thermal damage is almost always your go-to, and against armor ships, explosive or kinetic is almost always your go-to. And you can see that play out right here on the resist profile of this Tristan. We're shield fit. We have the most of our hit points in shields. Our lowest resist is EM. Now, when you get to Tech 2 ships, that starts to fall apart really quickly. Tech 2 ships of each race have different resist profiles based on sort of the lore. So if I'm not mistaken, Caldari, are always fighting against Galente, and so I think they have higher... No, I'm definitely get that wrong. Let's pull one up.
Highest hole is EM, generally on Caldari.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, you can pretty much rely on that across the board. Caldari are almost always shield fit, and their hull is almost always EM. It's crazy how bad that hull is on certain ships, like on the Tengu, I think.
0%.
Yeah, exactly. It's nuts. You have to just... Every resist mod that you have on the Tengu is dedicated towards getting that EM resist up to something that's not awful.
Welcome to G's Trading Hub. Please note there has been reports of scammers in the local area.
I'm just pulling up a Vargr here just to look at the resist profile. Without this...
I think it's generally kinetic for Minotaur, and then thermal for Amar, and then for Galente, it's like mixed between explosive and EM, depending on how they're fit.
But you can see that I don't know these, super well by heart. You don't honestly need to know them super well. What I would recommend is when you're flying solo, when you're about to engage something, there's usually like a minute to 30 seconds when you kind of know what you're about to fight, and you can look at the info and see their resist profile. And I actually recommend doing that all the time. If I'm warping across the system and I'm pumping my directional scanner and I see, oh, there's an Enyo and it might be at the outgate, I'm double-clicking on the Enyo entry in my directional scanner to bring up the info for that Enyo, and I'm going to go look at its resist profile for armor and see what ammo I should load or what drones I should use. This all translates to fleet stuff, by the way, as well, in case anyone was curious. So that Tristan, one of my favorite ships for solo, is a destroyer. This one right here. And if you are aggressive enough, you can actually kill sabers with this thing. Sabers will love tackling you because they'll be like, "Oh, it's a thrasher. I'll kill that," and then they explode, and it's great.
Can you link that?
Oh yeah, I said I would do that. Thank you. Sabers, other dictors, assault frigates, those are all good targets in this ship. Can't really handle cruisers, in my experience, just because it's too thin. But it does a fantastic job at killing other destroyers and frigates. Questions on this Thrasher?
No.
Okay. Something to keep in mind would be, I guess, sort of what range, like that Tristan we just looked at, we're kiting. This, we're definitely brawling. We want to be on top of our target. If you're fighting something with blasters, Galente or some Caldari ships that fit blasters, you actually might want to pull out a little bit away from them, maybe 1 or 2k. I'll actually load some ammo in here and we'll get an idea of what our optimal and fall off are.
Small blasters are between 1 and 5 kilometers. So if you're like at 7 or 8, you should be fine if you switch to barrage.
Yeah, so that's the trick, right? For blasters, though, the damage at the edge of fall off is very low, whereas with projectiles, the damage even deep into fall off is still very high. So you can be still within the blaster range and taking damage, but you'll be taking much less damage than they will. Again, depending on the matchup.
That's really good to know.
Yeah, range dictation is a huge thing, just in PvP in general. Autocannons and I guess projectiles. Well, we'll stick with the close range guns. Autocannons can outrange blasters. Again, you might still be taking some damage at the edge of their fall off, but your range is a little further. What this is actually called is Scram Kiting. You'll see this basically is, from my memory, if it's not still true, someone let me know. Scram Kiting is the meta in faction warfare, lowsec. And it can be used in nullsec as well. And essentially, scram kiting is where you are scrammed, so the opponent has you scrammed, you can't use a micro drive, but you also have them scrammed, and you're either just using your ship's base speed or an afterburner to stay near the edge of scram range. So you're not kiting in the traditional sense where you're trying to be as far away as possible. You're trying to stay within scram range, but near the edge of it. That's called Scram Kiting, and it is used to great effect when you're flying a ship that does not have super short range blasters, but the enemy does. Blasters are the true losers in the Scram Kiting meta.
Any reason you don't have hail in the cargo bay?
You could. I have found, since I'm doing 0 things to increase the tracking, like I've got double gyros down there, that hail just doesn't do as well as fusion.
Okay, it just doesn't track as well.
You can, and yeah, exactly. There's a tracking penalty to hail above and beyond the tracking penalty of fusion. Yeah, it's a good question, though. You could definitely bring hail with you. It's not expensive, so that's fine. And then I would load it against destroyers with low explosive resist. I wouldn't really load it against frigates.
Would you change out one of the modules to get some tracking, better tracking?
No, I would just load Fusion.
Okay.
You can try it and see how it goes. You can drop a gyro for a tracking enhancer, but I don't think that's a good trade on this ship, personally.
Yeah, besides, scrum rate is 7.5, unless overheated.
Oh, Tech 2 is 9.
Yeah, we're talking about Hail, though, not Barrage.
No, I'm talking about the
Oh,
range
yeah,
you want
it's-
to have.
This is a meta scram, not a Tech 2 scram.
Real quick, what is meta?
Meta modules are like, they're named, they're not Tech 2, or they're
Oh,
like
okay.
faction. So like, there's, if you look at the information on it, like if you click on that meta module, this warp scram, and you go to the attributes tab at the bottom, it says meta level 1. Do you see that?
Another good place to look is just go to the Variations tab on any module. You can see there's a standard Tech 1 variant, in this case Warp Scrambler 1. Then there's all the meta versions, Faint, Epsilon, Initiated Compact, and J5B Enduring, and then there's the Tech 2 version followed by Storyline Faction. Those meta versions are always better than the standard Tech 1 version, and it's just a matter of which different, what would you say, advantage you need from the module. Usually, meta modules are dictated by fitting and fitting room, usually. Sometimes capacitor need in certain cases, but like for this Warp Scrambler, you'll see Scoped is slightly longer range than the other meta versions. Compact has slightly less CPU need, and Enduring has slightly less cap use. And you'll see those words or synonyms of those words used pretty consistently throughout various modules. Like for micro warp drives, you see Enduring, Restrained, and Compact. And Restrained, in this case, is indicating a signature radius reduction, which is good. You want less sig from your micro warp drive. Enduring and Compact mean the same thing as they did before.
Pilots are reminded not to engage in unlicensed SW and that all items are sold.
It's a good question. Other questions?
The one thing I would add to that is that the meta modules, when it comes to guns, are switched around depending on what type of weapon it is. So like prototype versus scout, etc. It's not the same for all the different.
Yeah, they haven't done module tier aside for weapons yet that I know of. So everything, all these different meta versions of modules used to have completely useless names to them. Like they were named, but it didn't mean anything. Tier aside is CCP's effort to change that and to make their module naming more systematic, like the ones I just mentioned. There are some areas of the game, some modules that have not had that done to them yet, and I think Guns is one of them. Guns are one of them. Guns is an area where meta module names don't have any sort of systematizing or make any sense. In that case, you just need to look at the attributes or compare them. The compare tool is a fantastic thing that everyone should learn about. So again, you can go any one of those modules, go to the Variations tab, and at the bottom, click on the compare button, and you can compare all of the different attributes to all of those different versions of that module. Good point, Thomas. Okay, recently CCP gave a buff to Tech 2 short-range ammunition, like Hail, like someone was mentioning earlier. Another thing that was buffed that actually saw some of the, what would you say, the highest effect of the buff was Void. Void is the Tech 2 hybrid weapon short range ammo. And in the Destroyer class, that affects the Catalyst. That fit there is ridiculous. You need a tiny little CPU implant, 1%, to get that to fit. But it does a stupid amount of damage. You just need to be able to get right on top of your target. That's the only trick.
Whoa.
Pilots are reminded not to engage in unlicensed displays.
Just a quick question. I'm thinking if you get like an opponent who's warp disrupting you, and you just have your scrams. Do you approach opponent, then you turn off your micro warp drive? Is that like a standard thing to do so you can back them better?
In many cases, yes. Getting close to someone and then turning off your micro warp drive is a good idea. It's very situational. Yeah. So sometimes.
Today's forecast.
Cool, thanks.
Please fly safe.
Yes, signature radius bloom is sort of this hidden thing. The numbers are all there. You can see them. I'm simulating this catalyst fit, and you can look at the targeting and see the signature radius at 408 meters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can turn off the micro warp drive in the simulation and see 68. So it's this huge, massive increase in your signature. But it's impossible to tell in-game, like when you're just flying around, what effect that is having. It's something you kind of have to learn to feel. My micro warp drive is on, and I'm just getting slammed. Maybe it's because the micro warp drive is on that you're taking so much damage. That's not always the case. Sometimes you're just taking a ton of damage because you're going to take a ton of damage no matter what. But sometimes it is the micro warp drive's fault, and it's really hard to know when that's happening. It's something you need to get a feel for sure. Okay. So for frigates and destroyers, I would, if you guys have other, we looked at, Mimitar and Galente only. If you guys have other ships that you want to see some good fits for, and we can talk through them, that's great. I'm more than happy to do that with you guys. If not, we'll move on to some cruisers.
Hey Zip, I noticed, so the catalyst, you're hull tanking it, right?
Yep.
But no damage control on there. Wouldn't that give you a significant bump, especially hull tanking?
Yep, it would, and you definitely can do that. It's a silly fit. It definitely works. But yeah, you can drop one of those mag steps for a DCU and get a significant EHP bump. The question is it worth it to you?
Survivability through the hull versus killing them quickly.
Yep, it's the same question you ask with the Thrasher, right? The Thrasher doesn't have a DCU either. It's got double gyros. I've found, just from a straight up 1v1 standpoint, and again, this is it's been quite a while since I've done that particular matchup, Thrasher versus Saber, but the gyro version for some reason works better than the gyro plus DCU.
Gotcha, thanks.
It's like faster killing them than trying to hold them.
Yep.
What do you think about dual props? Is it like I put like the Caldera Navy hook bill?
Yeah. So, I mean, ships with a ton of mid slots, and even some ships that don't have a ton of mid slots, it's definitely an option. You have to really know what you want to do if you're going to dual prop. Like, you have to have something very intentional and specific. You don't just dual prop, because you feel like it. usually, at least in my experience. Let me try and find one that I have.
Like it would help dictate range.
So here's a breacher that I really like. And it is dual prop, and it's designed to get up close and personal to ships that don't want you up close and personal. And so you use the micro warp drive to get right on top of something that wants you nowhere near it, like a T3 battle cruiser is a great example. Tornado, Naga, Talos, but they have drones, so it's rough. You should be able to handle a Talos too. And the Oracle, some cruisers that only fit long-range weapons, and you get up on top of them using the micro warp drive, and then once you're on them and you have them scrammed, you switch to the afterburner to maintain your transversal and keep your SIG down and stay in range to use your rockets.
It's a nice fit.
It's a lot of fun.
Please take extra care during our renovation work.
So yeah, dual prop, definitely. That's not the only use for it. Sometimes dual prop is used for sort of a defensive mechanism, an escape kind of thing. You can micro warp drive into a situation, get scrammed, and then use an afterburner to get out of a situation. The rest of the fit has to be kind of able to do that as well. You kind of need a defensive scram and maybe even a defensive web to make that work, because if you're scrammed and you're using your afterburner and you don't have a scram to stop their micro warp drive, they can stay on top of you anyway, you know? Lots to consider for dual props. You also sacrifice a lot with dual props in terms of what else you can fit, because it takes up a lot of fitting room to fit 2 prop mods on your ship. Something we didn't talk about for dual props is actually micro jump drives, which is on the larger end of ships. Battle cruisers and battleships can fit micro jump drives. Dual propping there is actually something that I think is more common. It can be used offensively or defensively. Something to keep in mind if you're planning on flying battle cruisers or battleships in PvP.
Joey has the triple prop vertex.
Yep, triple prop too. Actually, just as a note, I highly recommend triple propping your DSTs if you guys fly those around. Just sacrifice all the tank. You don't need tank. If you get caught, you're dead anyway in most cases. Triple prop it. Make sure you have an interdiction nullifier and a warp core stabilizer. Look. What is this link, Beastly?
Please take extra
Nasty death.
Yikes.
It's some dude I found on a recruitment channel saying he's looking for a corp to get money because he's poor again. And then I looked at his skill boards, I was like, oh, no wonder.
Yep, that's rough. Any ships in particular that you guys want to see a fit for? If I don't have one, we'll make one together and we'll kind of talk through it. Specifically frigates and destroyers. If not, that's okay.
Civipal?
Tech 1. We can do that a little later, but Tech 1 for now. No? Okay, what about a cruiser? You guys got any cruisers that you'd just love to try out solo? You want to know how to fit it?
Omen.
The Tech 1 Omen, I actually just prefer the Stabber to do the same thing.
Gotta go with Omar, man.
No? Okay.
Actually, hold on one. Actually,
Yeah.
The Osprey?
Osprey's a Logi ship.
Oh, okay.
Grass-
I mean,
Grassy
I've used
friend.
it for kiting.
If you're talking about the Osprey Navy issue, yeah.
Yeah, the Navy issue.
Yeah, we can talk about that. There's a pretty standard fit for that. I don't. So here's can talk some theory now. Here's the problem with flying faction ships and Tech 2 ships, especially when you're solo. And Thomas actually is a huge, what would you say, beneficiary of this concept I'm about to talk about, which is engageability. If you look not threatening, you'll end up getting fights that are more potentially fair. Let's put it that way. If you fly an Osprey Navy issue, problem one is everyone knows what they do, so they're not going to the dream scenario for an Osprey Navy issue is an enemy who just keeps throwing frigates at you. And you're like, oh, yep, kill that, kill that, kill that. And sure, that might happen here and there, but you shouldn't rely on it. It's not what's normally going to happen. What's normally going to happen is someone is going to get some really fast heavy tackle like a ramjag, get that on top of you, and then just bring in a bunch of cruisers and blap the shit out of you, or destroyers, or whatever it's going to be. They're not going to give you the fight you want because everyone knows what it does, and it's an overtuned ship in some ways. Same thing with the Vedmak. Nobody wants to give a fair fight to a Vedmak because you're already not in a fair situation anyway. It's a fucking Vedmak. Same thing with the ONI. Everyone knows what it does, and they're better ships, and that's one of the very few times where we can actually say any of X is better than Y. The problem is you're playing a social game, and people aren't going to just do what you would hope that they would do and be stupid and just run into you and die. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thomas, tell us about how you handle that particular fact of life.
5 Tech 1 cruiser. You'll have fun. It's not very expensive. You lose it, no big deal. But you're not gonna get blob generally. Nobody's gonna go look at a fucking bellicose and go, let's get 12 guys to go kill this bellicose because really he's so threatening.
They underestimate you, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's nice. So, is there really going to be much in the frigate class that it would be, solo PvP, doable?
Yeah, so we're looking at this breacher. I love this breacher. It's fantastic, and it's cheap. The Tristan we looked at, also amazing. There's a Tormentor fit for low sec that I love. Let me grab that.
Because I think it'd be cool if you could put together some type of Heron. Because the last thing people are expecting is any PvP in a Heron.
It's pretty popular PvP.
Is it? I don't see a lot of it, I guess.
My next solo PvP video will be the Heron, and I will show you the fit that I used.
I like 2 autocannons and a rocket launcher with 2 medium ASBs. That's what I like. And afterburner. Scram.
So there's that. And there's that. 2 different fits. They do slightly different things.
Yeah, I have that, except I don't have the tracking disruptor. But it makes sense. Or the web.
Oh, there you go. So check out that loss that Beasley just linked. Confessor, but he's beam fit and he doesn't have a scram or a web. So if even a little Rifter gets on top of him, it's going to kill him. It's just a matter of time.
What about they were asking, Elotium was asking a Newt Vexor or Newting Cruiser.
Yeah, you could do that. Let me grab a Vexor.
A lot of these things throwing me off on the power grid. I don't have enough. I mean, is that just going to boil down to different, there's not just going to be one specific skill for that, is there?
Several. It's a skills issue.
Yep, there's several skills. Power grid management, shield upgrades if it's a shield ship, advanced weapon upgrades. Is that power grid?
Yes.
Yep. What else?
I mean, just the Magic 14 or Magic whatever they are.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is Magic 14. If you're using any rigs that have drawbacks to increased power grid need for whatever it happens to be, that rigging skill will reduce that drawback. Sometimes you need rigging skill of 3 or 4 in a certain category of rigs in order to fit certain ships. That's one of the last ones that people usually check. Why can't I fit this? Oh, it's because I need launcher rigging 3 because I'm using a warhead catalyst and it's making all of my launchers take too much CPU.
You can also sometimes fudge a fit with a 1% upgrade. Implants not that expensive.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Just throwing a 1 or 2% power grid or CPU implant in can fix a lot of problems. They're super cheap. And also, this is where looking at the info on a module, going to the variations and finding the least fitting option, in variations to switch from like a Tech 2 to something that will fit for you. And, use that while you train up the skill to fit the Tech 2. What was I opening up?
Vexer.
Oh, a Vexer, yeah. Sorry for the flashbang, Twitch chat. Let's see. Cruiser gang.
I don't know if you're going to get to this, but you could talk about, I don't know if you're going to talk about all the trade-offs between shield ships and armor ships as far as damage goes.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. I usually don't, I usually leave that for, what would you say? A fitting class, but it's worth touching on here, yeah. Gosh. Just trying to find a Vexer fit that will work as a starting place. Yeah, actually this will work as a starting place. So I don't know if you guys are watching the stream, but I'm gonna kind of take this shield Vexer fit that I have, which has all drone damage amplifier, 3 drone damage amplifiers, and no weapon amplifiers in the lows. I'm going to take off the weapons and put newts on it, see what it looks like. The kinds of things this would do well against are ships that use capacitor heavily for either their tank or their weapons. I'm looking at you, Amar ships. Lasers take an insane amount of capacitor to run. Engineering. Yep. Compact. Nope, can't do 4 of them. Can do 3. The problem you're gonna run into. So the problem you're gonna have with this is your own capacitor. So you might need to do armor because you need a cap booster, or
Mixing NOSes with newts.
yeah, I was gonna put a NOS on there. Too much power grid. We'll do a small one to round it out.
Still there, like a NOS at the beginning, it's good to throw it and then turn it off because he starts getting less cap than you.
Right, so NOSes will only drain cap if the ship that you're targeting has lower absolute capacitor. I don't think it's percentage, I think it's absolute capacitor, right?
I'm not sure.
Let's find out. Will not drain your target's capacitor below your own capacitor level. I think that's absolute, I don't think it's percentage. And so this situation, the fit that I just linked, this is a great time to talk about cap stability. you should not focus heavily on cap stability in most PvP ships, specifically most solo ships. Many fleet PvP ships will focus heavily on capacitor stability because you'll be kiting around with a large fleet for a long period of time, needing to run your micro drive constantly. With many solo and small gang PvP ships, you can use your micro drive much less. With this ship, I would recommend using your micro drive only as long as you need to get on top of the target, and then it should be off. And that's not only for your signature radius, but also to conserve your capacitor, because you're going to be chewing through it pretty quickly with your newts.
A little trick that Rico told me about is in scram range, if they have an MWD and they're scrammed and they're not kiting off, then turn offline your MWD, and that will save you some cap.
That's a pretty advanced maneuver. But yeah, so the micro warp drive reserves a portion of your capacitor to basically just by being online. If you're actually having cap issues and you're in the middle of a fight and it looks like you might win the fight and you don't need to run your capacitor anymore, you can right click offline it and you'll get a small cap, probably cap regen and cap amount boost that you can maybe finish off the fight with. It's kind of a last ditch thing, at least in my opinion.
You'll offline the warp drive or a booster?
Offline the micro warp drive.
Gotcha.
I've never actually done this in combat personally.
I mean, if you're running a blaster boat or a laser boat, then it might make a difference.
True, yeah.
Especially if you're getting neuted to hell. Also, like there's been fights where you just couldn't run. I couldn't run my guns, and so I lost. If I had my guns, I would have won.
Yeah, actually, that's it's not the same, but it's related. If you burn out your guns, usually only one of them has burnt out. But since they're in a stack, it looks like all of them are burnt out. So if you do burn out your guns, unstack them, and there may be some that are not burnt out. You can restack those ones and keep going with one less gun or maybe two less guns.
Hey, that's cool to know.
That's a new one. I hadn't heard that before.
I actually had that happen to me, and I didn't know that that was the case, and I lost a Brutix to a fight that I probably could have won because of it.
Here's us.
Good.
No, nothing important.
So you had brought up armor versus shield. We'll touch on it briefly. Essentially, with shield ships, you are sacrificing mid slots to tank, and you're freeing up low slots for damage. The sacrifice of your mid slots is utility. You're not able to fit as much control as you would. Your mid slots are control. What I mean by that is that's where you fit your scrams, webs, tracking disruptors, micro warp drives, afterburners, that kind of thing. Those are all mid slot modules. If you're shield tanked, you have less room for those kinds of things. You have more room for damage in the low slots. Yeah, your low slots are damage. You have more room for damage, so that's kind of the trade-off for shield. You lose some control to gain some damage, and we're skimming over a bunch of other nuances to keep in mind, but just moving past some of those. Again, this is the super basic version. Your low slots, if you are fitting an armor tank, you're sacrificing damage, but you're gaining control, right? You have mid slots available for more prop mods if you want, more E-War modules if you want, but you have less low slots for damage modules. That's the 101 version of the difference between armor and shield. There are speed differences if you're fitting plates, but we don't need to get into that too much.
Also, if your slot layout is for lows, then you generally need to use lows.
Yeah, we can talk about slot layouts. So Minmatar and Galente ships tend to lend themselves to either shield or armor tanking, depending on what you want to do. That's generally, it's not hard and fast. For Amar, they're almost always going to have plentiful low slots for armor tanking and limited mid slots for shield tanking. And for Kaldari, they're almost always going to have plentiful mid slots for shield tanking and limited low slots for armor tanking. So you'll see Kaldari is almost always shield, Amar is almost always armor, and Galente and Minmatar is kind of a split. Slightly more shield Minmatar, slightly more armor Galente. And that's something you can think about as to how your opponent may be fit as well. Not just your own fitting choices. This is probably the ship that I have done the most solo in, period. Part of the reason for it is what we talked about a few minutes ago with engageability. It is an extremely undervalued ship in the EVE community. No one likes the Stabber, which is fine by me because it means that people don't think I'm a big threat.
Do you play this the kitey way, right? With Stabber? And you have defensive web and newts?
Yeah, so the engagement envelope of the Stabber is just huge. A, because it's really fast. Cold, I'm going almost 2,700 meters per second. With heat, you're looking at 3,800. That's crazy fast for a cruiser. And you start out most engagements by wanting to kite. Again, most engagements by wanting to kite. But then if something does catch you, you have newts and a defensive web and autocannons, which track really well in general, to deal with anything that gets close to you. In many cases, if I end up fighting frigates, because frigates are a really common thing that you're going to end up fighting in PvP in general, you'll actually just run at the frigate. You won't even try to kite. You'll just try to catch them so you can web and newt them and kill them quickly with the right damage type.
So on like so this is like a super new bro question I've had for a while. So fall off range is within 19 kilometers. So anything obviously past 19 kilometers, I'm not even going to be able to hit. But that optimal range.
It depends on the ammo, but go ahead.
Well, yeah. Well, let's pretend we loaded ammo and it still says this.
Okay.
So what I'm focusing on is fall off and optimal range. That's my question. That's what this is geared towards. So fall off range is going to basically be where I cannot hit them at all. And then is optimal range like so on this one where the optimal range is, within 3,000 meters. If they're within that 3,000 meter range, that's where I'm going to do the most damage.
That's correct. So I had this question when I started playing too, and it wasn't made clear to me until I had been playing for quite a while. The question I had was, if I'm right at optimal, is that where I'm supposed to be? If I'm inside optimal, am I doing less damage? And I think that's your question too, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, and it took me the longest time to figure this out too. You're not doing less damage if you're closer. If you're at 0 on someone, you're doing the same damage as if you're at 100 meters or 200, all the way out to, in this case, about 3K.
Now, are there some weapons that if people are too close to you, they lose their effectiveness?
No, the only thing to keep in mind when you're talking about getting really close is tracking. So the closer you are to someone, the more their movements relative to your ship change their angular velocity or their transversal or however you want to calculate it. You can see this when you're driving along in a car. The mountains far away don't look like they're moving at all. They're very far away, but the road right next to you is moving very, very quickly. You're moving at the same speed, but something very close to you, the closer it is, the more any movement is going to affect your gun's ability to track.
That's called
Okay.
parallax.
Thank you, parallax, yes.
Makes sense.
So keeping that in mind, some ships you just want to approach. With this, if I'm fighting frigates, I actually want to get on top of them and then kind of start pulling away. And the reason I'm starting to pull away is because they're frigates and they're probably a little quicker than me. They probably have me scrammed at this point. But I'm using my web and my newts and a little bit of manual piloting, just double clicking in a single direction to force them to lower their transversal. I'm not saying it very well, but if you just keep approaching them, you might just keep missing because they're going to be trying to orbit you and get under your guns in most cases if they're already tackled.
So they follow you and eat all the bullets.
Right, exactly. That's what you're trying to make happen. The downfall of this stabber is the cap life. That is the number one thing that will end fights for you before you're ready for them to end is the capacitor. So you have to be really stingy with using your micro warp drive in many cases. If you turn off the newts though in the simulation, a minute and 30 of cap, and actually you can turn off the web too, and maybe even the point, that's 3 minutes of kiting. Your guns don't use any cap, so that's fantastic. They run on CCP nitrous oxide, so you can just shoot all day long and never use a single cap. But your micro warp drive and your other modules chew up a lot of capacitor. It's the price that you pay for flying a Tech 1 cruiser, unfortunately. Let me grab another cruiser. So you guys will recognize this caracol fitting with one minor change to the mid slot. This is the doctrine caracol that we have. Actually, a couple mid slot changes because our doctrine caracol has no tackle. This is a great solo ship. The only problem is that everyone knows what it does. Everyone expects the rapid lights and the point and the micro warp drive and the web. Everyone knows exactly what you're going to do if they see a caracol. That said, there's still a lot you can do with it. You just have to know that people expect exactly this fit, or at least something very close to it. This is why I like to fly this one. Because nobody expects the hands.
You're seeking more for big stuff, other cruisers, right?
That's right, yeah. Although with the Scram and Web, you can apply to things that you might not think you'd be able to apply to if you can get on top of them. That said, this is an Ishtar killer. That's what I built it for. It's to catch ratting Ishtars and kill them. With a very cheap price tag.
So webbing somebody and then orbiting them up close is very advantageous for you?
When you're fighting an Ishtar, you're dealing with drones. And the drones don't care how close or far away you are from the ship that you're engaging. They're just going to do their drone thing and pretty much deal max damage to you. You can try to defang an Ishtar with this and shoot the drones. Might work, might not. I just try and overload immediately and kill them before I die.
But if you weren't fighting an Ishtar, that's the general rule of thumb. Like webbing somebody and then orbiting them up close is going to be advantageous.
In general, yeah.
Okay. But basically, you're just trying to kill that Ishtar as quick as possible.
That's right, yeah. And actually, that's another thing worth mentioning. Overheat early and often. It's better to lose a fight where all of your modules are very toasty than to lose a fight where none of your modules have been burnt at all and you could have overloaded them and maybe gotten a little more. So overheat right at the start of a fight. Don't wait until... A lot of people use overheat as like, oh, I better overheat. It's getting to the last moments. I might win or might lose, whatever it is. That's a sign that you should have been overheating from the beginning, and then you'd be fine. Just keep an eye on your heat damage, obviously, and most of the times I stop overheating about halfway through a fight, and then if things look close near the end, I'll start heating, 1 cycle on, 2 off, or something like that.
Okay, so overheating causes damage per cycle.
Yes.
Okay.
And the damage spreads on the rack, and I think it can spread between racks, although someone will have to tell me if that's crazy talk. What I mean by that is, in this fit, if I overheat my Scram, then that shield extender and the web next to it can take collateral damage.
Yeah, so that's why I was told that if you take, like, on this fitting, if you put the web on the outside and then put an extender and then the micro warp drive and then an extender and then the Scram, like, it helps spread that damage out so that, like, if you overheat all 3 of these, which you wouldn't, but if you
No,
overheat
you definitely
all 3 of
could.
these,
There are situations where you would want to do that, and that's absolutely right. Is putting passive modules in between active modules is absolutely something you want to do.
Yeah.
So a lot of
Even
people
I
do it in
think
high slots.
I think they even damage more faster.
If they're next to each other,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
because they're getting their own damage plus what they get from being next to it.
Yeah.
Yep. So with this one, you can put the shield extender in. I'm looking at the stabber now, by the way. You can put the shield extender in between the micro warp drive and the other 2 mid slots, and then put your newts in between the autocannons. So like autocannon, newt, autocannon, newt, autocannon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Unknown that told me that the other day.
Yep. It's one of those things that nobody's going to tell you. You just kind of got to learn it for yourself. Unless you're here, I guess.
Pilots are reminded not to engage in unlicensed
Any other fits you guys want to see? Concepts you want to talk about? Questions you have?
So generally what we've gone over are going to be the ships we're going to want to, if we want to start, trying our hand at solo PvP, those are going to be kind of the ships to go after.
These are ships that I have experience with, that I know well. Some other people have been posting, or should be posting, if they want to, some other ideas in Flying Dangerous. That's totally fine. You can always just ask. But make sure when you ask, you ask in a certain way, and this just goes for most questions in Eve. But I want to do X. How should I fit Y ship? Right. So don't just say how should I fit my caracal. Say I want to kite. How should I fit my caracal? And then someone will give you the answer, probably of that rapid light fit that I showed.
Okay. And so just for clarification, because I feel like I know, but I just want to clarify, kiting is going to be, I'm going to keep them at range and apply damage so that they can't hit me.
Usually orbit. It depends. Keep it range can work in certain situations if you know the range of their weapons and you don't need to worry about them hitting long range shots. Keep it range can work. Keep it range is usually what is preferred for Scram Kiting in low sec. But orbit, I think, is probably a much more common method of staying away from something, because not only are you keeping your ship at range, you are increasing your transversal.
Okay.
Is it for
As
usage?
opposed,
Sorry.
as opposed to, like, if I'm running in a straight line, then they're not having to track me as much.
That's right.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's cool. I wanted to ask, manual piloting is always preferred over orbiting? Or just doing...
You hear this a lot, and the people that say it, I don't think are really being serious if they're really being honest with themselves. I give ship commands 90% of the time. Knowing how and when to manual pilot is really the question. There's actually we can just break this down. Let me go find a clip real quick. Hang on.
Also think about the mental cycles. Like, if you're going to have to be focusing on several different mods,
Yeah.
versus if you're mostly, buffer fit.
Yeah, I've had trouble, like, if I do manual piloting, it just concentrate on that, and the rest, I get oblivious.
That's what I run into a lot of times. There's lots of things going on.
For getting away, I always use that manual pilot.
Right.
Okay,
You
so
said for like getting away.
Yeah, like if you're trying to, like you're scram kiting or something, and you're trying to
Okay.
get away, like it's a fight you're going to lose, but you have an afterburner and they don't, then you could ostensibly get away if you pay attention to what you're doing.
Okay.
yeah, another thing to keep in mind is you can set your keep it range to, I think the max is 100,000 kilometers. And that's a really good GTFO thing. If you want to just, I want my ship to be as far away from this as possible, you can select the thing and hit keep it range. If you have it preset to, 100 kilometers, it's just going to start moving you away. Sometimes that won't work. Sometimes manual piloting is preferred. So I'm trying to show you guys a situation where I wasn't manual piloting and it wasn't working, and then I switched to manual piloting and made the thing work. So I linked a video, and I'm going to try and find the timestamp you should go to.
Says video unavailable.
Oh, that's a bummer. Okay, well I'm pulling it up on the Twitch if you want to have that open.
Roger.
Okay, so I'm sitting at 607 for those who aren't watching Twitch. And in this fight, I've been fighting a couple of frigates. This is in a variation of that stapper fit we were looking at. And I'm going to let it run here, and we're going to see the wolf gets on top of me, and I'm trying to, I think, either keep him at range or orbit him, and everything is missing. Nothing is happening, and he's just slowly burning me down. And I'll try and point out the timestamp at which I switch from the stupid thing to the smart thing. So Ishkur warps away, it's a tragedy, and then it's just the wolf. And I am approaching him. And then I'm keeping it range 1,000. And none of it's working because my ship is constantly turning. I'll say this to you guys too. So right around 6:35, you can turn off the sound on the video, by the way. Right around 6:35-ish, you can see I'm either approaching him or I'm keeping it range. And my ship is constantly trying to turn to go directly away from him because I'm using keep it range. And then right here, just before 6:51, you'll see I swing my camera, look directly up, and double click. And suddenly, I'm tracking because I'm moving in a single direction, he's falling behind, and he dies. So that is the difference between giving a ship command, even if it's keep it range 1,000 kilometers versus manual piloting.
I don't know if it also helps in tracking, like if you see the direction the guy's going, if he's going in a straight line, you match his direction and the same sense, and it helps your tracking.
Yep, that's called transversal matching, and it is definitely a thing. If you should always have your tactical overlay on, and it will show you his vector line. You can use that to help transversal match, and yeah, absolutely.
On Tech 2 versus Faction are basically Tech 2 generally more damage for a trade-off in either.